Welcome to a place where love is not just spoken, but lived. A place where friendship transforms into longing, where walls shatter in one unforgettable night, where passion is more than desire, and where once love awakens, nothing can ever return to the way it was before. These are not ordinary stories. They are confessions of the heart, told through every stolen glance, every trembling touch, every moment where silence spoke louder than words. Here, love is not safe or simple. It is raw, it is unguarded, it is the kind that consumes and redeems at once. If you've ever felt the ache of forbidden desire, the surrender of passion, the truth revealed through touch, or the awakening of love too deep to deny, then you are in the right place. Stay, listen closely, and let these stories of deep love carry you into a world where hearts speak their truest language. It always began so simply. Days filled with laughter that felt endless, conversations that carried deep into the night, and the kind of comfort that only came from someone who knew how to listen without judgment. Nothing about it felt dangerous in the beginning. Nothing about it suggested that the ground beneath would one day tremble with something unspoken. It was friendship in its purest form, the kind of bond that didn't demand explanations, where silence wasn't awkward and where presence alone was enough. But something quiet shifted over time. At first it was hardly noticeable, like the faintest shadow at the edge of light. A glance that held a fraction too long, an accidental brush of skin that seemed to linger, the way laughter began to fade into pauses filled with unspoken things. Every shared moment began to feel heavier, charged with a current that neither dared to name. There were nights when the closeness was almost unbearable, sitting shoulder to shoulder, talking about everything and nothing, while the air between felt alive with heat. His eyes began to rest longer, softer, holding as if searching for an answer that hadn't yet been spoken. And when his hand brushed against a hand, it no longer felt like the careless touch of friendship. It burned, it stayed, it left behind something that whispered promises in the silence. It wasn't chosen, this shift. It wasn't as though anyone decided to blur the lines. It was more like gravity, slow and certain, pulling closer with every moment spent together. The comfort that had once been so innocent grew into a kind of ache. Every story shared, every laugh echoed, every look held longer than it should have, became another thread pulling two souls closer until the fabric of friendship could no longer contain what was weaving itself into something else. There was fear in it, too, a fear of breaking something precious, of stepping into a space that could never be undone. Yet that fear was tangled with desire, with the magnetic pull that grew stronger with every heartbeat. The thought of turning away became impossible because the more it was resisted, the deeper it pressed. Friendship had been the doorway, but desire was slowly becoming the room both were standing in, waiting to be acknowledged. One evening, the silence between words spoke louder than anything else. Sitting close, laughter faded, and for a long moment there were no words at all. Only the weight of a gaze, steady and unrelenting, a look that asked a question without sound. Breath grew shallow, hearts pressed faster, and every barrier carefully built over years of friendship began to tremble. That closeness felt dangerous, but it was also inevitable. The space between was too small to hold back what had been rising for so long. Every glance, every accidental touch had been preparing for that moment. A hand reached out and didn't pull away this time. The air grew heavy with the kind of longing that could no longer hide behind laughter or lightness. Friendship had carried everything as far as it could, and now something else was demanding to be born. The walls that had once felt solid began to weaken, crumbling beneath the weight of desire that could no longer be silenced. It wasn't betrayal of what had been shared before. It was the natural, undeniable evolution of it. Friendship had been the root, but this was the flower it had always been reaching for. and once that realization settled in, nothing could feel the same. The bond was no longer only about comfort or understanding. It was about the unspoken fire in the eyes, the trembling anticipation in the air, the forbidden desire that had become the truth of every moment together. It was impossible to ignore, impossible to return to the way things once were, because love had begun to demand more than friendship could give, and in that undeniable pull, everything shifted forever. The night it happened, everything felt both inevitable and impossible at once. For so long, the bond had lived in safe spaces, late night talks, quiet comfort, gentle laughter. But that night the air carried something heavier, something trembling at the edges of control. The trust that had been carefully built over time wrapped around both of us like a cocoon, and within it there was no longer room for walls to stand. It began with silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled because it already speaks louder than words. Sitting close, too close, hearts beat in a rhythm that seemed to echo in the stillness. His gaze lingered, not playful, not fleeting, but steady and searching, as though asking for permission without a single word. Every part of me knew what was coming, and yet every part of me also fought against it, clinging to the safety of what had been before. But when his hand reached for mine, this time it didn't pull back. That touch was no longer accidental. It carried weight, it carried desire, and it carried a tenderness that melted the last defenses. Skin against skin, warm and trembling, it was as though the walls that had stood for so long finally cracked open. The first kiss was hesitant, almost fragile, like stepping onto untested ground. But the moment lips met, the hesitation vanished. It wasn't just a kiss. It was years of silence breaking, years of longing finding their release, years of love speaking without a single word. The world outside disappeared, and in that moment, there was nothing but two souls colliding in the most raw, unguarded way. Every barrier, every carefully drawn line, dissolved in the heat of that touch. The laughter of friendship transformed into gasps of desire. The comfort of companionship shifted into something deeper, something consuming, as if every piece of connection had always been leading to this very moment. His arms pulled closer, holding tight, and in that closeness came the undeniable truth. This was not a mistake. This was the voice of love finally finding its form in passion. Each movement, each caress, carried a tenderness that made the fire burn even hotter. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't careless, it was deliberate, sacred, as though both knew the weight of crossing this line and wanted to honor it with every touch. The raw physicality of it wasn't separate from the heart. It was the heart poured out through flesh, through lips, through trembling hands that refused to let go. Time lost its meaning. There was only breath against skin, only the sound of hearts racing, only the sweetness of surrender after holding back for so long. And in that surrender, the truth of love was undeniable. This wasn't just desire. This wasn't just a night of passion. It was something born of trust, something carved out of years of closeness, something that could only exist because every wall had finally shattered. The weight of the world lifted in that moment. There was no fear, no shame, no thought of consequences, only the certainty that love had chosen this path. Friendship had been the bridge, but passion became the language through which love revealed itself fully, unguarded and real. When the night grew quiet again, when the fire softened into stillness, there was no going back. The walls could never be rebuilt, the innocence could never be reclaimed, and yet there was no longing for it. What had been found was far greater. It was the merging of hearts and bodies, the revelation of a love that had always been there, waiting, silent, until passion gave it a voice. That night became the moment everything changed, the moment barriers collapsed, and the moment love finally showed its truest form. There was a moment when the silence between us no longer felt empty, but full, so full it could almost break. Words had been the bridge for so long, laughter the shield, trust the quiet bond that held us together. But when his lips finally found mine, when his hands traced the shape of my skin, it became clear that words had never been enough. What lived between us could not be spoken. It had to be felt. Every kiss carried weight, as though years of restraint had been bottled up inside it. His mouth was both fire and tenderness, a confession and a promise. Each time his lips moved against mine, it wasn't lust tearing through. It was love, buried too deep for language, now rising with every touch. Breathless gasps filled the air, not from desperation, but from the overwhelming realization of being fully seen, fully wanted, fully known. His arms wrapped around with a strength that felt like both possession and protection, and for the first time, the body felt like the only vessel strong enough to carry what the heart had been hiding. The way he touched was not hurried, not careless. It was reverent, as though every inch of skin was sacred ground he had been longing to reach. The way he looked, the way his breath trembled as it met mine, said everything his voice could never hold. The world outside no longer mattered. Time unraveled. In the soft glow of that night, there was nothing but skin against skin, heartbeat against heartbeat, souls unraveling in a rhythm too old for words. Desire was there, yes, burning and alive, but it was fused with something deeper. Every gasp was not only hunger but release, a release of all the unspoken truths the heart had carried in silence. When his hands traced over curves and edges, it was not just to claim, but to learn, to understand in a way only touch could. Every shiver, every trembling sigh became part of a dialogue without language. It was love speaking in the most primal, raw, and honest way, stripped of disguise. Where words might falter, the body spoke with clarity, each movement saying, "I choose you. I have always chosen you." And when the closeness deepened, when bodies finally intertwined, it felt less like surrender and more like coming home. It wasn't about lust consuming. It was about love revealing itself through the only language strong enough to carry it. The rhythm of passion was not hurried. It was deliberate, as though both knew the sacredness of the moment. Each movement built not only heat but connection, a weaving together of souls in a way that could never be undone. The intensity was overwhelming, not because of the physical alone, but because of what it carried. Each moan, each whispered breath, was a truth once locked away. The body said what the lips never dared to speak, that love had been there all along, waiting, burning, longing for this exact moment. And when the fire finally softened, when the stillness wrapped itself around us, the truth settled like the quiet after a storm. This was not lust. This was not a fleeting night. This was love in its most vulnerable, unguarded form, expressed through the only language that could hold its depth. That night the body revealed the heart's deepest secret, that love had always been there, unspoken, waiting for the moment it could finally be set free. Crossing that line was like stepping into a fire that could never be undone. The moment lips touched, the moment arms pulled closer, friendship no longer existed in the way it once had. The laughter, the safety, the ease of being together, all of it was still there, but transformed, wrapped in something deeper, heavier, impossible to return from. It was as though the world shifted in one breath, and nothing familiar could ever be untouched again. For so long, there had been comfort in the boundaries of friendship, a reassurance that closeness could exist without danger. But once the body learned the truth of his touch, once the heart felt the weight of his love pressed so raw and unguarded, those boundaries crumbled into dust. It was not possible to pretend anymore. Not possible to laugh the same way, sit the same way, or look at him with the innocence that had once been so natural. Something had awakened, and that awakening was irreversible. The fire that had been quietly smoldering beneath years of friendship finally roared to life. Every kiss carried the weight of that truth. Every brush of skin spoke of a love that had always been there, waiting for courage to bring it forward. Each stolen moment became a reminder that what had begun could not be silenced, could not be caged back into the neat box of companionship. The heart had tasted too much to ever settle again for less, and yet with that fire came the ache of knowing what was lost, the purity of friendship, the simplicity of before. But even that loss carried no regret, because what had been gained was too powerful. The bond that was once laughter and ease was now entwined with passion and vulnerability, too raw to deny. Every glance carried memory, every touch carried weight, every silence carried the echo of what had been shared. There was no erasing it, no undoing the night when love finally spoke through passion. It was both terrifying and beautiful, this new reality. Terrifying because it could never be hidden, because it meant stepping into a future uncertain and unplanned. Beautiful because it felt more true than anything ever known, a love that burned through every layer of fear and left only the undeniable behind. It wasn't just desire, it was connection so deep that pretending otherwise would be a lie to the soul itself. Every time eyes met after that night, there was no pretending. Every smile carried heat, every laugh carried longing, every quiet moment between us was heavy with memory. The innocence of friendship had vanished, and though a part of the heart mourned it, the rest of it embraced the new reality with trembling, desperate joy. To return would mean denial, and denial was no longer possible. It became clear that life had shifted in ways that would forever change its course. This wasn't a fleeting night of passion, nor was it a secret that could fade with time. It was love awakened, fierce and unrelenting, a truth that refused to be silenced. And once love like that awakens, it can never sleep again. Nothing could erase the fire or return to innocence, because the truth of love had finally been revealed, and once revealed, it could never again be denied. If this story touched your heart, if you felt the fire, the surrender, and the awakening of a love that could never return to innocence, then don't let it end here. Subscribe, like, and share this journey so others can feel what you felt tonight. More stories are waiting, stories of friendship turned to longing, of passion revealing love, of moments that change everything. Join this sanctuary of deep love and never miss a heartbeat. Until next time, hold on to the fire that awakens your soul.